to the cloud. Welcome. This is AMATYC 2022 webinar series, Small Changes for Equity with Dr. Dana Patterson. Project Access, Vicki Todd. Thank you again to McGraw-Hill Higher Education, the proud supporter of the AMATYC webinar series for 2022. Thank you again for signing up for today's webinar. If you'd like to support future AMATYC webinars, please consider becoming a member of AMATYC. And a reminder, the views expressed by the presenters are not necessarily the views of AMATYC. Commercial products mentioned by presenters are not endorsed by AMATYC. Recordings of all previous AMATYC webinars are found via the archive page. This webinar will be uploaded within 2 weeks or more, depending. And a little self-promotion. So our Toronto conference is coming up soon in November. We also have traveling workshops, Project Access, and the AMATYC News. AMATYC webinars are offered so you can engage in professional development from the comfort of your own home or office with colleagues or by yourself. We will have an attendee survey. It will populate in the chat about 15 minutes before the end of our webinar. And today's webinar presenter is Dr. Dana Murray Patterson. She currently serves as the Director for Office of Intercultural Affairs at Western Carolina University. She's volunteered as a mentor and presented nationally, locally, and internationally on issues related to diversity, cultural identity, and intersectionality. In 2006, Dana completed her PhD in higher education administration at Washington State University with an emphasis on cultural studies and social thought in education. She completed her BA in social science, and her MA in student personnel services in higher education. Her passions include social justice and leadership development. She resides in North Carolina, has 4 adult children, including a son and 3 daughters. And with that, I'm going to switch it over to Dana. I'm going to stop sharing and you should be able to share. Make sure you unmute.
Thank you for that reminder because I would surely forget. Surely. And so let me just double check and make sure that I have all of my sharing mechanisms working. Share this, yep. And can folks see my screen? Okay, wonderful. Well, again, I'd like to welcome everyone and thank you for being here with me today. I'm hoping to say some things. I'm definitely not an expert on teaching math, but I do find great pleasure in talking about equity, diversity, a sense of belonging, and inclusion. And so those are subject matters that I really enjoy talking about. And so I think bringing that into context and intersecting with teaching habits and teaching more culturally responsibly will definitely be something that we might all enjoy today. There'll be a little something for everyone. So I wanted to just start off with kind of breaking the ice a little bit. And I wanted to tell you all some jokes. And I'm just going to tell you, I'll be here all day. So, just get ready for this one. But I know not all math jokes are funny, just some, S-U-M, you all can laugh in the chat if you'd like. So another one I had, hey, have you ever noticed what's odd? Well, every other number. And then I have another one for you, and I might just pop these in there a little bit throughout. But do you know what mathematicians do after it snows? I don't know if people are saying in the chat, but they absolutely make snow angles. But anyway, I really, really love these little jokes that I found on Happy Numbers. It's a website called happynumbers.com. So if you want to go there and find the jokes, then feel free to go and do that. But don't look at them before I finish asking you all them for this day. Don't look at them yet because I want to still get you all with some of these jokes. So we're going to go ahead and get started. The title of my presentation, Small Changes That Make All the Difference. And so we have some objectives, some learning outcomes today. And I just have 3 that are here, but of course we might all encounter something more than this, but I'm hoping that everyone that is attendance at least gets these 3 things. Participants will understand how a small change could make a big impact in teaching math. And participants will learn some techniques for being culturally responsive as a math teacher. And participants will discover some techniques for being more inclusive in their class. And so those are some of the objectives or outcomes. And I wanted to just say too, that throughout the presentation, I think Vicky's gonna be watching the chat. So if you do have a question, Vicky can just let me know that you have a question, because I am not able to see the chat when I'm doing in the presentation mode. So Vicky, just yell at me.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to start with this little image. And I don't know if many of you all have gotten to play in the water this summer, but it's really been a hot summer, I tell you. But I want you to just for a second, picture yourself on the shore of a lake or a pond, and you cast a smooth stone right into the water. You see it enter the water and then it disappears, leaving behind a bounty of ripples that seemingly spread out for miles. The act of just tossing a small stone into the water will result in a change that can be felt much further away than the initial entry point. Proof that small actions can and often do lead to much bigger changes, even if you can't see how far they go. So when I thought about this, what we're talking about today, it really gives me this imagery that, you know, we're talking about maybe changing something small, but the impact that it may have on your students feeling a sense of belonging in the classroom and feeling like math is something that is actually for them. Then all of those feelings can come from just making a simple change that we'll talk about some options for making that change today. So this was a excerpt from a person, a teacher that was just sort of talking about culturally responsive teaching. And this is one of the things that they said was a problem with math. And so, one of the things that we all count, sort of literally and figuratively there. And again, you'll just know I don't stop with the puns and the jokes. It's a part of how I calm myself down when I'm feeling anxiety. So the problem that they say with teaching mathematics is that the students who take the courses are split into 2 groups. They said there's one that enjoy mathematics and take the courses because of the interest, and the students that are forced into taking mathematics courses to fulfill their major requirements or have to take the course to graduate, such as in high school. The problem with this is that you have to find a balance between helping the students that want to continue with mathematics and pushing them forward in the field, and reaching the students who are only there because they have to be there. The trick is assisting both groups of students within the necessary time limit, the semester or during the class itself. The best way to reach kids who don't want to be in the class is by varying the problems to reach their interest. It's absolutely necessary to promote the mathematics process, because whether or not the student wants to admit it or see it, mathematics models into almost every aspect of life for higher education. And those of us that have been living life for a little while, we know that this is absolutely true. And so when we think about it, whether we're someone who's on the side of folks who have always done well in math and just love it and enjoy it, or the folks that are just trying to endure it and get through it, we all count. So that was just one of the things that I wanted to share, that quote. And then I wanted to just take a second and ask you all, and maybe you can put your answers into the quote here, but what are some of the reasons that it's difficult to make math inclusive? And there's no wrong answer, so feel free to go ahead and put whatever you think. And you can make those sort of short answers or what have you. maybe I will try to see the chat.
Emotional burden expected of women.
Okay.
I think it is the foundational skills, different foundational skills that people come in with. Most students are not motivated to even work. Historical exclusion, lack of role models, group activities with different ability levels and backgrounds. Any specific application appeals to some and not to others, it seems. Students believe they cannot do the math. Having abstract ideas that are neutral.
Okay.
Lack of seeing themselves in the jobs.
Yeah, these are all really great. And they definitely touch on the items that I wanted to pull up, and I see the different learning styles, confusion of ability and desire. So I'm seeing lots of those pop up in the chat. Thank you all for chiming in on that. So I'm going to just share 3 quick ones as well too, to just sort of, and some of them may be a little bit of a repeat or encapsulate things that others have said. But one would be, of course, language barriers. According to the National Center for Education Statistics, almost 10% of public school students, and this was back in 2016, but they were English language learners. And so as we think about how the demographics of our country continue to shift, then we probably know that even more percent of those students in 2022 are actually students that are in our schools that are learning, that are English language learners. My sister teaches ESL, and she also teaches Spanish for middle school. And so she shares with me all the time that she is seeing more and more students who are actually acquiring their English skills at the same time that they're going to elementary school. And so that sometimes that can be a barrier because they're still just trying to learn some of those very abstract concepts about meanings and language and words. And there seems to be a little bit of that language barrier. Second one's systemic discrimination. Some of you talked about this a little bit, but underrepresented students may have experienced discrimination in schools and other public settings or public entities. And they may perceive authoritarians or teachers as someone who is maybe not to be trusted, or that triggers some feelings in them of inadequacy, or they may just feel unsafe or unwelcome at school. And then finally, and many of you alluded to this one, a lack of representation. Many educational materials are unintentionally biased. Books typically feature white protagonists. Movies typically depict predominantly white classrooms, and even standardized test questions are often unknowingly written in a way that favors the experiences of racial and ethnic majorities. Situations like these can communicate to students of color or different races that school and classrooms are not really designed with them in mind. So again, this does sort of encapsulate many of the things that you all were saying. So all of those things are actually correct. So I wanted to jump into right here, 6 ways that mathematics instructors can actually support diversity in their classroom. And I wanted to just share a little bit with you about each of these. So the first one says, use students' interests in contextualized tasks. And so when thinking about that one, what communities and interests are represented in the problems that you assign to your students? Researchers have shown that students are more motivated in the material when it is applicable to their own interests and their own communities. So basically, when it builds on knowledge that students already have coming into the classroom, that kind of knowledge tends to be much more engaging to students. The second one says, when expose students to a diverse group of mathematicians. And I know that this was one of the things that came up in terms of why it's hard to teach inclusive math as well. And so when you think about who are the mathematicians that you tell your students about, if you can diversify your students' image of mathematicians by highlighting mathematicians who do not fit the typical stereotype, describe mathematicians as multidimensional individuals that have real struggles, have real families and hobbies and abilities, and people that have maybe disabilities, people from different races and backgrounds, and people with different interests, then students may be able to more easily locate themselves and their own interest in mathematicians and develop a genuine interest and genuine fondness in a person who is very prevalent in mathematics. If we can communicate stories of mathematicians to students while engaging in mathematical contributions that the individuals have made, then we will certainly make a great impact on students. And so some of the resources that I was going to share with you all here and I have these included here if you wanted to take a picture of it later, but Mathematically Gifted and Black website, Latisms or Latins and Hispanics in Mathematical Sciences, the Black female mathematician who sent astronauts to space, and other books that will be mentioned in the resources here. But many of these are not names that some of us maybe grew up hearing all the time, but including some of these math experts are definitely ways to have students identify and to see a plethora of people from different backgrounds and experiences that are actually doing and enjoying math. 3, design assessments and assignments with a variety of response types. So I know that I always enjoyed a good essay question. While it may be difficult to do an essay question in math, it's not impossible. And many of you teachers probably know that already. Most mathematics professors are mathematics professors and teachers because they were successful or because you've been successful as students in math. And so when we think about that, we have to create and structure assignments to include a variety of types of problems as well as settings for those problems. If you vary the test environment as well by allowing students to work in groups or maybe giving a take-home assessment in order to give students flexibility in the amount of time for completion. Many students start to, in their early grades of class, maybe they have not been assessed with some dyslexia or other issues that may make them less susceptible to sort of picking up easily to some of the terminology and some of the concepts of math, or maybe they just need a little bit of more time or they need a little bit more encouragement. But making sure that you are varying the ways that you are assessing the knowledge from the students and harvesting that knowledge actually gives an edge because it goes also to show a more wide range, shows your students that you're more diverse and that you're also taking other learning styles into account. Number 4, use systematic grading and participating methods. So who are the students that when you look at your class, who are the ones that you expect to succeed in your course? Maybe you expect them to succeed because they had an elder sibling who already took your course and they did well. And so you know that the parents have a very strict homework policy. Or maybe they're a student whose parents have not been as involved and you have not heard that student speak up in certain settings. And so maybe you're not expecting those students to contribute as much. But how are you actually inspiring and encouraging students to contribute in your class? One of the things that the reading here or that this resource from Hobson suggests is that teachers should attempt to hold all of your students to the same high standard. And generally, when teachers produce and propose high standards to their students, then generally most students will actually reach to those measures that the students set and the standards that the teachers actually set for them. And students take pride in knowing that assignments are not being changed, or that they're not doing a different assignment from their peers. They may have different parameters or different expectations around that, but to know that they're also being challenged and that the expectation is that they would do excellent as well. Number 5 says, consider your course logistics. And so when you just think about, what are your office hours? What time of day are your students most active in the class? When you think about the best times for having assignments due or meeting with students outside of class, maybe considering just some of the obstacles that may stand in students' way. Perhaps that's their commute time, or perhaps there's a student that has to work after school when you have your office hours, or a student that brings or walks a younger sibling to class, or a student who just needs to leave school in time enough to maybe leave one event and have a meal before they have to go and engage in some other after school activities. And so varying the times that you make yourself available to meet with students can really go a long way in terms of considering and adjusting the logistics in your courses. And then finally, encourage students to embrace a growth mindset. Carol Dweck's popular work shows that individual mindsets regarding intelligence can and often do influence academic motivation and performance. Dweck describes students with a fixed mindset as having a very static view of intelligence. But it's kind of concrete. It's like either you learn or you can't learn. But students with a growth mindset, believing intelligence can be developed, this later mindset being able to persist in the face of challenges and setbacks and grow in that process. One of the things that I can share with you as a person who works extensively with college students at Western Carolina University is that many times there are people from the generation that I'm from, and I won't have to go too deep into which generation that is, but from the generation I'm from, see students that are Generation Xers or millennials as students that have maybe less ability to sort of persist and to make it through adversity. But if we realize that, basically it's not about their ability to make it through adversity and their being accustomed to that, but it's more about just developing a mindset that says, I can and I will. And a lot of that mindset has a lot to do with just having teachers that encourage and that expect those types of things from their students. So I am going to stop with that one real quick and see, are you all ready for another couple of jokes here? Okay, well, since I can't hear anyone, then I will assume that you all said yay. And I saw that other joke they're saying that the last one was not funny, but it was cute. I thought that was funny too. So which tool is best for math? The multipliers, get that, multipliers? Okay. Swimmers love one kind of math more than all the others. What is that? What do you think that is? Division, yes. See, division, okay. And one more. So why was 6 afraid of 7? Well, of course, because 7, 8, 9. I crack myself up. So that's one way to keep myself going here. So I'm going to move on to the next slide because I do want to save some time for some questions. So just thinking a little bit about culturally responsive teaching. Culturally responsive teaching, or CRT, not to be confused with critical race theory, but culturally responsive teaching is a research-based approach to teaching. And it actually connects students' cultures, their languages, and their life experiences with what they learn in school. These connections help the students access rigorous curriculum and develop high-level academic skills. And I know that this is something that we all want for the students that we work with. We want them to develop the skills that are going to aid them in their life journey. So understanding that being responsive to the cultures that they come from and that they already embrace is a really major way to do that. Our brains are wired to make connections. And so if a student comes into the classroom and we use the information that that student has already developed and already has a good grasp on, or concepts that they already know about, then you already have a hook in which you can bring them in to that knowledge and bring what they already know and use it in the classroom. And here's a quote from Dr. Jim Ewing from an Education Week teacher, and it just says, if educators are not culturally responsive, some students may develop the belief that math is for others and not for them. And that I know for as a person who struggled with math, but ended up running into a really, really great and motivational high school teacher who really encouraged me and let me know that I was a mathematician and that I counted too. And I had to work a little harder than maybe what I perceived some others might have to work. But at the same time, I knew that I could achieve it because the standard was set and my teacher believed in me that entire time. So some culturally responsive teaching strategies for educators. And I'm not going to read all of these. This again will be available to you all, but I will share just some of these. There's just 5 really quickly. But first one, activate students' prior knowledge. Again, it's taking off from what students already know to use to anchor the lesson so that students feel like they're not trying to grasp a new concept or understand what the concepts are in the actual problem, using concepts that make sense to them. And one way to do that is making the learning contextual. Tie the lessons from the curriculum to the students' social communities, make it more relevant. If you're reading a chapter, and I know that we're not all math teachers, but if you are reading a chapter in history class, for example, discuss why it matters today in your school, in your community. If you're sharing a math concept with a student and you've been sharing something about space or outer space, perhaps you also share some that talk about, measuring the size of a pancake or the size of the wings of a little bird, or things that students may actually have more of a connection with already mentally. The third one says, encourage students to leverage their own cultural capital. And this is major. Not all students, again, come from the same background. And it's important to encourage those that typically, historically, or traditionally don't have a voice. And the thing about that is teachers have an option. There's opportunities for teachers often to choose how they will explain certain concepts to students. And a lot of times we as professors and educators, we like to choose material that we know a lot about. And so this one encourages our students to really think about the spaces where they have a lot of knowledge, where they get to be the expert in the classroom, and maybe even teach their teachers something. The fourth says, reconsider your classroom setup. And again, this is kind of similar to when are your office hours and thinking about things of that nature. But look at the materials that you have in your class, even classroom decorations, door decks, and student activities. Are they inclusive? Do they represent the entire community? Do they represent the entire community that's even in your classroom? And if you think about the small changes that you take to be culturally responsive in your classroom, again, for some of your families, for some of your students that typically just don't see themselves represented, this can be major in terms of igniting and kind of putting a fire under their own learning. Finally, building relationships. And this goes back to the teacher that I was telling you about that I had in high school that really took me under her wing and understood that while math was challenging, that it was important for me to learn math for where I wanted to go in my life. And she set about making it a point to make sure that I always felt valued. And she worked to really build a relationship with me. So even with our students sometimes, and even with those students that may have been disrespectful or may not exhibit the signs of the ones that aren't raising their hands to answer every single question, those may be the students that you have to work harder to build a relationship with. But it's really, really important that we do that. So, and again, these are not just teaching strategies that work for minorities or students from diverse and culturally diverse or ethnic minorities and backgrounds, but they're good teaching strategies for everyone. So at a glance, just to say the three things to sum this up, culturally responsive teaching is a rich, intentional approach that's woven into every aspect of student learning. It focuses on the assets students bring to the classroom rather than what students can't do. So it's not a deficit model. It's definitely looking at an assets-based model. It also raises the expectations and makes learning relevant for all students. So if you can remember that this is the goal when you're making culturally relevant classroom and making your subject matter culturally relevant, that these goals are all really important. So I wanted to show you all a very quick little video here. It's only about 4 minutes, I believe. It may not even be 4 minutes, but this is an example of cultural responsive teaching in action. And so this classroom is not a math classroom, but I think that the teacher does a really good job. So if you will just indulge me for one moment, then we will share this little clip and then we will come back.
Hi, Dana.
Oh,
Sorry,
yes.
I just wanted to let you know that there is a Q&A question. I'm not sure if you caught that or not, Vicki.
Okay. I hadn't seen it yet.
It says,
I can read it. Dr.
okay.
Patterson, what I hear you saying is that students have different needs and are coming from different backgrounds and experiences with mathematics. As such, our goal may not be to treat all students the same as stated in your abstract. By definition, equity ensures that everyone in the classroom has the same treatment. That was her emphasis, an opportunity for advancement, thereby creating a more level playing field. Could you comment on this definition of equity?
Absolutely. And Helen, thank you for the grace to answer that later as well, but I will go ahead and say that you're absolutely right. Equity already kind of assumes equality in the very nature of equity, because you can't everyone can't have everything that they need. You can't be, sort of dole things out on an equal basis until everyone is at the same level. They're starting at the same point. And unfortunately, just because of the nature of what systemic oppression has done to some of our communities, some of our school districts, and even some of our students, the communities that they come from, that they live in. We'd love to think that all schools are created equal, but we know that if we just go and sort of examine the textbooks in some of our classrooms, we know that some students get better prepared in various subjects, and some students have less preparation in some of those same subjects. So absolutely, equity is about making sure that everyone gets exactly what they need. But you can't really, it sort of assumes that in equality that you're going to have already realized some equity there if you want to move forward with equality. Does that make sense? And I can't see there. Okay. Okay. All right, I think we're ready for the video. And so I will start.
This made Grace sad for 2 reasons. She didn't like Natalie,
Can you all hear?
and she didn't have a daddy of her own.
Uh-oh, I stopped it. I will start that over again. I apologize.
This made Grace sad for 2 reasons. She didn't like Natalie, and she didn't have a daddy of her own. Is he clear? Grace felt less and less like being the pink and floaty kind of princess. She couldn't imagine I think windows and mirrors is a nice metaphor to explain the importance of students seeing themselves in text and then students learning about others through text. Touch your nose if your dad doesn't live with you. Yeah, me too. Text selection is really important, and I think when students can see just even the slightest connection, they're so excited.
Reach Academy has seen an increase in diversity. We're seeing students from all over the world. Many of our families have been impacted by trauma. We need high-quality teachers in Title I schools that really believe in our children and their capacity to learn and not just look through a deficit lens.
I've known I wanted to be a teacher since I was in 2nd grade. For me, I wanted to be that teacher who looked like my students, who understood the struggle of what it means to be a smart little Black girl. When I was little, I loved to read. As I got older, I wanted to see myself reflected in stories because I started to become more aware of my own identity. So our question this morning is, what is your favorite book that we've read this year and why?
My Flower's Beautiful Daughter because it made me learn about new cultures. My favorite book is Crown because I can relate to it. Okay, mi favorito libro es el.
So many of our families, they feel invisible in this society. They haven't been seen. They haven't had a voice. And how do we ensure when they walk through the doors of Reach Academy that they feel like they are somebody, that they are important?
It's really important that students see themselves in all aspects of their classroom and feel valued and respected. It's also really important to foster this understanding of others so that when they grow up, they are able to work with all different kinds of people.
We live in a world now where we have to build alliances across differences.
I agree.
All right, you are gonna get to create a character today. Somebody that you wish was in a story. So what is their hair like? Is it like yours or is it different than yours?
When I first came to this school, I didn't have any friends, and I wanna make her just like me.
Okay, so maybe one of the reasons why I love teaching is watching those aha moments in students. Sometimes it's just watching them get excited about something. It's really heartening to see students who may be judged for so many things be these brilliant little people who are gonna one day run the world.
I want this character to exist because I want a character to be like me because I'm smart and brilliant and awesome.
All right, before I jump into these, were there any questions or thoughts really quickly from that? I'm gonna leave some time for Q&A at the very end, but did anyone have any thoughts? Okay. All right, well, let's just quickly go through this. Some of the benefits of culturally responsive teaching. First of all, it raises expectations for all students. It helps students better meet students. It helps schools better meet students' needs, pardon me. It also builds cultural competence for your students and social mobility for all of your students. It helps students feel valued and empowered. And I'd also go so far as to say a sense of respect and self-worth. And those are all very important in developing autonomy and a sense of agency for students as they are developing a sense of self and learning to find their place in the world and learning to understand how they are actually being seen as a member of society. Never clicks for me. So here are some of the resources that I talked about for you in terms of the mathematically gifted and Black. And just to click on that just for a second, I'll see if it actually will let me pull that up. I don't know if that's actually in the screen, and that's not doing that. Okay, so what we will do is I will just send that to you all because it's not letting me do that because it pulled it up on my screen, but it wasn't it wasn't good enough there. So there are some publications here, and there are some resources here, and I'm sure that you all could probably find a lot more, but to be intentional about looking for those resources, to me, that's where the real effort and that's where the real caring starts. A teacher that is intentional about those efforts to communicate stories of mathematicians while talking about contributions that individuals who have made to the field that actually your students can resonate with. And it may not be around race, it may be around gender, it may be around nationality, it may be around ability. But as you think about it, just diversifying those stories and again, making those mathematicians real people that students can say, wow, they had a family, or wow, you know, they had parents and they went to school, and sort of understanding them as just not some sort of people that don't, you know, these historic figures, but actually real people that existed. So in closing, I want to say that if you just think about these 4 things, there are really 4 ways to create that positive ripple that's going to go far further than you can ever see. And that is 1, to acknowledge someone. You know, acknowledge the students in your classroom and the knowledge that they bring to the space. Acknowledge their ways of knowing, their own epistemologies and their own ontologies, because whether we think about it or not, students are coming into our classrooms with a set of knowledge already intact. And the best way for us to take them to the next level is to start where they are. Second one is appreciate someone. And again, this comes down to just appreciating the fact that there are different ways of learning, different ways of knowing, different ways of expressing oneself. And so diversifying our experience in the classroom respects and appreciates someone. Advise someone. If a student asks you specifically for a question around, you know, diversity with the subject matter, definitely work to give them that advice and to give them the support in doing the research even on their own. Some students might really enjoy diving in and finding some more diverse folks in when you think about subjects that they love, and finding a person that they can resonate with in that same subject may really enhance that love for the subject. And then finally, admire somebody. As educators, we know that, you know, knowledge is one of those things that, you know, we seek as individuals. And so to admire those who actually take a chance and that step out, admiring those who have contributed to the field, whether it be math or language or any other way of knowing, but to just admire others who are doing the work in the field, even if it's another teacher in your building who you really admire the way that they teach because of the pedagogy and because of the way that they bring their entire self, and they're very transparent in the classroom. And if nothing else, you could always admire them for their jokes. So before I end this, I want to tell you all just a couple more jokes. So did you know that there are 3 kinds of people in the world? Here they are: people who can count and people who can't. Ha ha, that one's funny. So do you know why 2 4s didn't go to the cafeteria for lunch? You got it, they already ate. Do you know the special trick to turn 7 into an even number? This is my last one, folks. Actually, you just remove the S. And now it's an even, okay. All righty, well, with that said, I am going to move on here to questions and answers. And thank you all so much for your attention and for listening as we went through all of this information. Again, this will be posted, so you'll be able to go on and find the resources. And also just knowing that me, Dana Patterson, you could reach out to me at Western Carolina University. My email's just dpatterson@wcu.edu. And you're welcome to reach out to me if you have questions about this presentation that maybe I'm not get to before we close the session. So I am going to look and see if there are any. Oh, great. Some folks are putting some other resources into the chat. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Mari and Luke. Appreciate that. Are there any other questions?
I just had it just makes me think that it's all about relationships. It's like that's the biggest thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It is all about relationships. And once you build a relationship with someone, you can engage that individual in good times and in bad times, whether you're going to talk to them about really hard conversation or whether you're going to have a really easy conversation, because you have a relationship, and that allows you entry to that person. That allows you access to that person because you have taken the time to build a relationship with them.
Helen asks, what do you think is the major barrier to community college mathematics faculty engaging in these practices?
Well, I am not really sure what the biggest barriers may be, but when I think about barriers to that system, I think about opportunities to practice. I think about also encouragement. A lot of times the culture of our environments where we teach and where we learn and where we work, those cultures and the climate, how it feels there and the freedoms that you feel to sort of try something new, it may be dictated to you by the ways that others sort of, the leadership makes the culture feel around trying new pedagogies and new ways of understanding. And if that's not encouraged and if it's not looked favorably upon, then some teachers may feel like it's just not worth the effort, especially if they have classrooms that have little to no cultural ethnic diversity. Then they may feel like, even though those students, they have no idea maybe who students are going to interact with later in their homes or in their communities, or who they admire, or the people that would be beneficial to them to hear about. I think you should teach diverse, you should teach in a culturally responsive way for all students. That is my absolute belief. And I believe every student has a culture, every student has ethnicity, and every student has an experience that you can build upon as a teacher. Other questions?
Judith said, we have a distinct lack of certain population sections in our math classes. How can we reach them if they aren't even in our classes?
So
basically we're missing parts of the population in our classes. So
absolutely.
How can we help fix that?
Yeah, I think it starts with acknowledging and to raise the question, to ask those who are responsible for, recruitment and retention or administration, to just let them know that you've noticed that the school does not have as much cultural or ethnic diversity. And you're just sort of wondering, maybe, have they ever thought about why that is, or what we can do as a community, as a class? Also, some of the things that I know at Western, one of the things that I have found really engaging is we do an exchange with an HBCU where we actually bring students from an HBCU that are majoring in teacher education, and we bring them for a week to Western, and they take classes, experience the culture, the environment, they meet with our students. And then a group of our students that are preparing to be teachers actually go and study for a week at their HBCU. And again, they get an opportunity to immerse themselves in different ways of knowing and actually experience that, even though the community doesn't afford a lot of opportunity to interact with students from diverse cultural and ethnic backgrounds. Any other questions? These are all good, really good. Well, now that everything is clear as mud, I am going to thank you all for your time and attention, and just tell you that I definitely hope that everyone has a wonderful rest of your day. And last joke I'll give you, the English book asked the math book, why are you so sad? And you know what he said? Because I have so many problems. So that is the end, folks. And thank you for your time and attention. Thank you, Mari, and thank you, Vicki, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Patterson.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
So again, I just wanted to let everybody know, please make sure to complete the attendee survey. It was populated in the chat. And as Dana already mentioned, she has provided her information and her contact. And this recording will be published as soon as I can possibly get it done. With that, y'all have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Mari.
Thank you.